With us today to talk about the budget update is Mr. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
So let's start with a brief overview of today's budget update.
Well, massive amounts of spending, massive deficit, but I think the two key takeaways for your audience here is number one, somehow Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is going to be outspending her last big spending budget. And number two is that debt interest costs are going to cost taxpayers about $200 billion by 2027.
And what were the major targets of today's budget update?
Well, the deficit is $144.5 billion. That's a massive deficit. It's slightly down from the projected one in the budget, but that's not because the government is operating more efficiently. In fact, spending is going up. Why we're seeing the deficit going down is because the government is increasing its tax take.
All right, sir. Well, in terms of the CTF individually, what is your organization looking for in terms of takeaways from today's budget update?
Well, we need the finance minister to come back with a plan to actually find some savings. We have to remember the context here, even before the pandemic, because in 2018, the Trudeau government brought the federal government spending to all-time highs, which means that before the pandemic, the federal government's per-person spending was higher than it was during any single year during World War II. And
are there any measures that you or yourself are looking at more closely?
Well, one of the things that we're very concerned with is how the government is fueling this inflation with its unprecedented amount of spending. By the end of this year, the federal government's debt is going to reach about $1.2 trillion. So I know many Canadians right now are worried about the increase in cost of living. So Canadians are rightly worried about how we're going to pay for all this borrowed money.
And we know higher oil prices may have helped to create more fiscal space for the budget. So what does that mean for government spending going forward if these higher prices continue?
Well, we continue to see government spending balloon. We continue to see the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, borrow a bunch of money, spend a bunch of money that we don't have. Now, we want to be seeing the deficit going down, but we want to see the deficit going down by the government finding savings. But we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is the exact opposite. We're seeing spending go up even above the massive amount of spending that was in the last budget.
And given that this was just a budget update, what is the CTF looking for in the next budget?
We need to see a concrete plan to balance the budget because we have seen years of borrowing, and years of borrowing means taxpayers are losing out on a significant amount of money just in debt interest costs. Let me say just one more time, by 2027, we are going to lose out on nearly $200 billion just on interest charges alone. That money can't go to healthcare. That money can't stay in our pockets because it's going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street.
All right, sir, just over a minute left here, but how can our viewers learn more about how government spending can impact Canadian taxpayers?
Well, first, number one, head over to taxpayer.com, check out our newsroom. But hey, we have pick up the phone, call your MP, email your MP, and tell them that it's time to really roll up their sleeves and find some savings in this big budget.
And why would you say it's important for our Canadian viewers to look into this as well?
Well, I mean, right now we're all worried about inflation. Well, Freeland is pouring more fuel onto the inflation fire by spending a bunch of money that we don't have.
All right, sir, just about a minute left here, but tell us a little bit more about the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and the work that your organization does.
Well, we're a nonprofit organization that we've been around for 30 years, pushing for lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. Please head over to taxpayer.com and take some action. Help us hold these politicians' feet to the fire.
All right, Mr. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Always great having you on Forum Daily, sir. Thank you again for joining us today on the show.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.